welcome back to Make More Music, the podcast that connects people to music and one another. My name's Chris, and I'm a board-certified music therapist. I believe that a more musical world is a better world. So today, in the midst of all the chaos and craziness, I'm showing you how another musician is making a living and having an abundant life through music. Today is with Mason Hickman. I was connected to Mason, Dr. Mason Hickman, through Scott of Stringjoy. He's one of my early episodes, and Mason was his college roommate and now has transitioned into engineering and spent a good chunk of his dissertation studying different things about guitar strings and the engineering behind playing an instrument. And we get really into the weeds with some different things, and I think you're really going to enjoy this one because on top of his awesome degree that he has, he was also a touring musician. He was on Obama's Music to Listen to from 2019, and he's just a cool dude. So without further ado, here is Mason Hickman, Dr. Mason Hickman, that is. All right, Mason. Well, thanks for coming on to Make More Music. We were chatting a little bit before going live, and this is going to be a very fun one, a nerdy one where we're going to go way down the rabbit hole. But before we do all of that, Scott plugged me in with you and told me about your civil engineering background. But before we get deep into that, I want to say, for rapid fire, open up whatever your media player is, and what's the last track you listened to?
Last track I listened to. Hold on.
Elaborate
for a second.
if you want.
Okay. Let's see. Pulling out my Spotify. It looks like I am listening to the album Music Has the Right to Children by Boards of Canada.
No, I don't know anything about that. What kind of music is that?
Boards of Canada was this like mid 90s. I think they're a Scottish electronic duo. They make kind of trip hop style music. They've just got really nice. It's all instrumental. And a lot of it, they have samples from an old TV series called Boards of Canada that the project is named for.
Oh, wow. So they were ahead of the curve with all this like lo-fi hip hop stuff then, huh?
Very, actually. And so, yeah, they're kind of one of my go-to, like I put it on when I'm working or studying because I like having kind of instrumental music. And I guess at this point, it's just kind of nostalgic for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Second, if you were an instrument, what would you be?
Oh, I don't know. That's a tough one.
It can be as simple or as philosophical as you want to take it.
I'll be a guitar.
All right, cool. Any reason?
Just that's the instrument I've always been closest to, I think.
Great. Well, we'll dive into that in a little bit, I have a feeling. So what is something that's been inspiring you recently?
Oh man. Inspiring me recently.
In the midst of all of this coronavirus stuff that we're going through.
I think just working on a lot of new music and getting to kind of transition into a creative zone for the first time in a while has been really nice for me. After having to hit the books hard for a while, I'm just kind of working on a lot of new music right now and feeling inspired by that in general.
That's cool, man. What's your process of digging into that creativity? Is that just improvising, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, a lot of times it's just kind of brainstorming. I got a piano last year, and it's been really nice having that in the house. I'll just kind of sit down and play, and sometimes things come out, and just keep track of them and build tracks around it.
Sweet, man. What is a pro tip or a hack that you've been practicing that you think other people should know about? Could be about anything, not even music related.
Oh man, these are tough questions.
I know.
Pro tip or a hack that I've had recently. I've been messing around a lot with like I've been messing around a lot with microcontrollers recently, with like Arduinos and stuff. And
Ooh.
I think just learning about like how simple like programming machines to do things, you can come up with all sorts of little things to do around your house, with things like that.
Like so, I only know about it in theory. So, what are some things you have done and messed around with?
Let's see. I've just been kind of getting into this stuff, but like automating certain functions in your house, like drawing blinds and things like that, can all just be done with some programming. It's kind of nerdy stuff. I've been like building a lot of guitar pedals and things lately, and so I guess just like getting into soldering and understanding electronics and things. It's kind of a fun little world.
Yeah, that's something I definitely want to get into. What would you say? Because I feel like guitar pedals, some basic like analog circuits, is a lot simpler than learning programming. But what would you say should I get first if I'm gonna hop into something like that?
I'd say get like a Raspberry Pi or like an Arduino kit and just kind of start messing with some of the tutorials and realizing like the stuff that you can do with really simple circuits. Like I didn't know really anything about this stuff a year or two ago, and it's just really interesting. It's like I've used it in my research actually.
That's awesome. I'm excited to get way down on the rabbit hole. Next, this hopefully should be a little bit easier. What's your go-to junk food?
Huh. I love Taco Bell.
Oh, great. I love Taco Bell too. I love that you can for $10 eat like a king's feast at Taco Bell.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I usually get a little carried away.
So, what are some must-haves if you're doing a carried away Taco Bell run?
Let's see. Probably a cheesy gordita crunch.
Hands up in the air. Yep.
Yeah, the quesadillas are pretty good. Sometimes I'll go with one of those. Crunchwrap Supreme. I know my way around that menu.
I feel you more than you know. I feel you hard. What's a person, project, or an organization that you think deserves a shout out?
A person, a project, or an organization. This is bad. I guess I'll keep it local here in Nashville. There's a music school called W.O. Smith that's really cool. They provide music education to low income families. I actually volunteered as a guitar teacher there back in college. And so, yeah, if you're in Nashville, check them out.
That's awesome. I'll have to link to that. Um, cool. Well, let's wind the clock way back then before you're playing with Arduino and you're getting a PhD and all of this. What are some of your earliest musical memories?
Um, well, as a kid, I was born in South Carolina. And as a young child, I got really into like the pop country of the time, like Alan Jackson and stuff like that. And I wanted to play the fiddle. And then my family actually moved to Utah when I was 6 years old, and
Wow.
no one there was really into the country music as much. And like as a kid and wanting to fit in, I think I kind of stopped listening to that. And then I hadn't really even thought about playing an instrument for a while. And then my brother got a drum set when I was like 9 years old, and just started teaching myself to play on his drum set, and then eventually started taking lessons, and then got interested in guitar and started playing guitar a year or so later.
So, fast forwarding a whole lot, what would you say do you feel like is your main instrument?
Guitar, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hopping in on drums and guitar, you're what, 10, 11 at this time?
Yeah.
So, what kind of stuff are you learning? Is it not Garth Brooks
No,
anymore at that
not a,
point?
not a,
What are
not
you
a,
what are you
not
into?
Garth Brooks. Although I would be interested in learning some Garth Brooks. I'll have to go back on that maybe.
Oh man, I
Um,
saw him last, or no, it was multiple years ago now. Because my wife is the same way. She listened to all of that growing up, And man, I gotta say, his concert was one of the best shows I've ever been to. It was
Oh yeah,
amazing.
yeah, I bet.
But sorry to interrupt. Let's get back
No.
into what you were listening to.
Oh yeah. So yeah, when I was that age, I think I got really into like classic rock, because from a guitar standpoint, I just all the riffs and the solos were really cool.
As you do.
Yeah, and that was it was good stuff to learn too. I got really proficient playing along to like Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and stuff.
Mm.
Um,
What's a favorite Jimmy song of yours?
the Wind Cries Mary.
That one's so good.
Yeah.
So, were you joining bands or mostly just playing at the house, or what did the teenage years of making music look like for you?
I played music a lot at my house, and I started learning how to record music on my laptop when I was maybe 14 or 15.
Oh, cool.
And so I started writing my first songs around that time when I was 14, 15, just recording them on my laptop. And I always wanted to be in a band, but I always had a hard time finding all of the musicians and coordinating it. Like I had a few friends, and I started playing in the jazz band and concert band and a bunch of the groups in high school. So I started meeting more musicians that way, but we
Mhm.
we could never find a drummer.
It's always the drummer.
It was
Oh,
impossible to find a drummer for our band. So like I had a few friends in high school that I would make some music with, but we never really were able to get it all together.
were you learning any other instruments for jazz band and stuff, or what was that?
Yeah, it was around that time I started learning piano. That was when I kind of dove into music theory. Like
Cool.
in my early teens, I didn't know how to read or anything like that. I just kind of learned a lot by ear and by tabs, and then I kind of started actually educating myself when I was in high school. Like when I joined jazz band and concert band, started learning to read charts and understand chord theory and stuff like that. Um, yeah, so I started piano around that time. I actually played some upright bass in the concert band, and then there's like this jazz vocal group that had an accompanying trio, and I would play upright bass in that as well.
That's awesome. So, through high school, what did you think you were going to do after high school? Because you're in civil engineering now. What was kind of your path going to college, and what did continuing past high school with music look like for you?
Yeah, so I had considered applying to music school for a minute, but in the end, like I was always really good at math and science, and I really enjoyed like calculus and physics when I was in high school. Um, so I thought I would do something with engineering. And I chose civil engineering because I'd always loved architecture as a kid and wanted to do something related to designing buildings. So yeah, I chose that, and I ended up choosing Vanderbilt for undergrad because it was in Nashville. And after having visited some of the colleges, the music scene here was kind of what drew me here over elsewhere.
That's pretty cool, man. And so, how are you interacting with music in undergrad? Because a civil engineering degree is a demanding undergrad program, but yet I know you've been in bands along the way. So, what did that look like for college? Was that big outlet for you, or what?
Yeah, I was always trying to pursue that in college. I was writing a lot and recording a lot, and I made a lot more friends in college, kind of around music. In high school, like I had a few friends that played music, but not a lot. And in college, that was very much like my friend group, and so I would kind of jam and write and record with a lot of people. Formed a few bands that I played in, but it was always really hard coordinating on college schedules how to get like 5 or 6 people together at the same time to rehearse and stuff.
Yeah, man, for sure. But it is funny being in Nashville because you could go anywhere and all the waiters and waitresses are like wickedly talented as well, and
Oh yeah,
everybody's so good in Nashville.
yeah. There's a lot of great players here.
Well,
A lot of great writers, producers, everything.
I guess before I get into your current stuff, what would you describe the genres and the type of music you like to write and play, or do you not even like to use like labels on things like that?
Yeah, I don't like to label it too much.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Is it more like acoustic driven or like any things like that? Or do you like to just totally go all over the place?
I like to kind of go all over the place, just whatever the song requires.
That's fun, man.
I mean, I've played in bands that you could characterize in a variety of genres. Like I've dabbled in different genres in that sense, but on my own music, I don't. It's hard for me to pin it.
Yeah, and that's totally good too. Um, so I got connected to you through Scott. So when did you meet Scott and start getting these ideas that you were telling me about with looking in depth at strings and material sciences and things like that?
Yeah, well, I actually met Scott a little over 10 years ago. He was my freshman year roommate in college.
Oh, that's
Um,
serendipitous. Yeah.
yeah. Um, we had actually found each other like online in a like Facebook group for like roommate matching, and we picked each other because we were both like, I play a lot of music. I plan on doing that a lot. And so we had some similar interests. So yeah, we were roommates in college. Um, but it wasn't until a couple of years ago that we really started talking about this string stuff. He started his company String Joy. I forget exactly when, but probably around 2014, 15 ish. And so it wasn't until around then that we started kind of talking about this stuff. And it wasn't until probably 2017, 18 that I actually started doing a lot of the research on the strings.
Yeah. So you're telling me you just got this PhD. So tell me about all that you've dove into. You just did your dissertation defense like a week ago.
Yeah.
So what have you been focusing on through all of that?
So a little research background. I've kind of gone all over the place in grad school. And so when I started research, I was actually working on a U.S. Army project on designing these new materials for blast resistant structures. So they were like these portable bunkers that they were building. And I
Wow.
was working on how you can use computer models to simulate the way that they respond to blasts and impact. And so that's kind of when I started grad school, that was kind of the focus of my research. I had done some of that as an undergrad and was kind of continuing in. And so from
Mhm.
there, I got interested in fiber reinforced composite materials because we found that with these materials we were looking at, that this would basically make them respond better.
Mm.
And so when you're designing composites, you have to ask questions of like, well, how big should the fibers that we add be? How should they be dispersed and all that? Um, and so I worked on how we can use computer models, and the field of computational mechanics is basically concerned with how we can simulate the way materials behave.
Mm.
So I started working on that for a while. And then from there, I kind of got a little bit into machine learning because I realized that I could use that to tackle some of the problems that I was looking at. And then it was around that time that I kind of had started talking to Scott and came up with this idea of damage detection in strings. And so I started kind of thinking about where to go from there.
So two things. What made you decide you wanted to go ahead and dive into a PhD program for civil engineering?
Well, I had started doing that research on the blast resistant structures as an
Hmm.
undergrad. It was like a summer internship that I had, and I realized that I really liked research.
Cool.
Um, in turn, you know, a lot of my colleagues were applying for jobs at the time, and I just realized that doing a PhD program, like going into grad school, would be doing more these working on these kind of interesting new problems, and that kind of appealed to me.
Yeah, I could see that you like to try and tackle problems and do different things, and it definitely seems up your personality for sure. So, and you get to work in the same lab, right? So you just kind of continued on.
Yeah,
through?
I'd looked into actually going a few different places for grad school, but I ended up getting a really good scholarship here at Vanderbilt and getting a job as a teaching assistant. So it kind of made the decision a little easy to
Yeah, that
stay. Yeah. So
yeah,
I
that's
just,
how it goes for sure. I got offered a similar thing, and I was like, "Well, I know where I'm going."
yeah, yeah. Oh, did you go to grad school as well then?
I did. I did. It's not necessarily common in music therapy, but did an undergrad in music therapy, and then right after my internship, um, which is the last part of the music therapy, uh, either equivalency or undergrad degree before
Hmm.
you can be certified. The place I was doing an internship, they had a TA spot opening up for their master's program. So I went to U of L, Louisville for undergrad, and UK, University of Kentucky for my master's.
Oh,
So,
cool.
and I'm a Kentucky boy, so
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
all, yeah. So I went there and stuck through and did the TA thing. So yeah, when the offer's on the table,
yeah, exactly.
free school, sometimes you just got to take it. So,
Yep.
but that's cool, man. So, what were those initial conversations that kind of piqued your interest in solving a problem with Scott?
I think just that question, I guess it was before we started the interview. I was talking about this, wasn't it? Of
Yeah, but
the
it's
strings
good.
breaking. Yeah. So I'll start over here. So we started talking about how I really wish that you could predict if a string was going to break before it happens. Like if there was some way to know a string's going to break, because most musicians, we have these rules of thumb, like you change your strings every 40 hours of playing, or you change your strings once a week, or if you're touring, it's maybe every couple days or something, because you don't want them to
Mm.
break on stage. Um, and so that got me thinking about how in structural engineering, there's this whole field of research called structural health monitoring.
Mm.
And to monitor the health of bridges, we put essentially microphones, these little sensors on them that measure their vibrations over time. And by analyzing the vibrations of a bridge or really any structure, they use these on airplanes and things as well.
Mm.
You can start to detect damage and determine if a structure is going to fail just by analyzing its vibrations. Uh,
So, just to interrupt real quick on that, what are some of the signs you're looking for in the vibrations that kind of give a hint?
Right. So it depends on the structure that you're looking at. But one interesting piece of kind of relevant research I found, I forget the authors or the name of the paper off the top of my head, but they've been looking at steel bridge cables like you would see in a suspension bridge.
Hmm.
And they found that there's generally four different types of damage that happen in these cables. There's some damage due to corrosion, some damage to fatigue from vibration, some different things, and that each of these different types of damage left a unique acoustic signal.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it might have, and so they occurred in different frequency ranges also. So depending on the type of damage that's happening, you would see different frequencies. And so, for reference, the human range of hearing is about 20 hertz to 22,000 hertz.
Hmm.
And so, in these bridge cables, I forget what frequency ranges they were looking at, but it might have been even like kilohertz or megahertz,
Yeah, outside of the
yeah, much
hearing
higher
range.
frequency range than we actually hear, but similar concept. And so, yeah, going back, I think that answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah,
So, sorry to derail that a little bit, but I was like, that is really fascinating.
yeah, yeah.
So, um, so you're looking at and transferring this knowledge from the bridges and thinking, how could we use that? So pick up from there.
Yeah, so I started thinking about tuners. Usually, every musician has a tuner. Before I
Mhm.
play, even I tune. And tuners are these essentially little computers that can measure in real time the fundamental frequency of a signal. And so they're, telling you what note you're playing. And so they're actually pretty powerful little processors. And they come in these compact packages. And what I realized is that theoretically, a tuner could actually capture other information from your signal instead of just the fundamental frequency.
Mm.
It could really measure the whole spectrum, or at least a good part of the spectrum, up to a few kilohertz, depending on the computational power. And it could potentially, even if you had a tuner with memory in it, then over the life of a string, your tuner, when you tune, could be taking little snapshots of basically the timbre of your string at different points in time. And then over time, if we had the data for this, which is something I'm working on, then we could potentially measure the way that, your frequency components are changing over time and identify damage based on that.
In the same way that you could look at the different faults in the suspension bridge, you're identifying, this frequency that you can't even hear is showing us a sign that it might break.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there's a lot of random variables at play here. So for example, everybody plucks the guitar differently. People have different guitars. And so really to analyze this, you have to look at all those variables. And I haven't even looked at nearly all of them yet. But that is where the machine learning approach comes in handy, because with these, new computational artificial intelligence algorithms we can identify patterns in huge amounts of data, and we can use these sorts of machines to make decisions about things and to identify things that might not be apparent to us.
So what are some things that you, through this machine learning process, have started to narrow down in your research?
So one thing I demonstrated was that I essentially wrote a speech recognition algorithm for guitar strings, and so I found that using a bunch of the data that I collected, that you could feed a random signal from a string into my algorithm, and it can tell you with about 95% accuracy what type of string material produced that signal.
That is wild. So, what all studies have gone into this so far, and what have you had to develop and troubleshoot to even isolate some variables and go through the scientific process with this? What has been the ups and downs and things you've had to figure out?
Yeah, so one of the first things I had to figure out was how to be able to pluck all these different kinds of strings exactly the same way in a repeated way. Because to really isolate the string response, you need to be doing it on the same guitar. You need to be plucking it exactly the same way. Um, and so I built a guitar, and that's where I kind of started messing around with Arduino. Was I needed to be able to pluck the string, and so a friend of mine in the mechanical engineering department kind of pointed me toward that solution and taught me a little bit about controlling motors. And so I got a little motor and attached this pick to it, so that I can pluck the strings the same way every time, and then just started testing a bunch of different kinds of strings.
What have been some takeaways for you then that you found through uh, all of this, basically?
Big takeaways. I get like relative to the guitar string stuff specifically.
Yeah. We can
Yeah.
start with relative to the guitar strings.
Um, yeah, I guess I'd say that there's so many factors that go into making a guitar string, that I'd never even really considered before, despite years of being a guitarist and changing strings. And so I guess the big takeaway was from kind of learning about the manufacturing process, is that there's still a lot of research out there that could be done. It's like that strings have been being made for hundreds of years now, um, and there's still a lot of things that we don't specifically understand. Um, and so I just think it's interesting how much potential there is for new research on this old subject, given the tools that we have available now.
And so far, have you focused just on the guitar, or have you looked at any other string instruments, or even antiquated strings like gut strings and old kind of more primitive ways of making strings and things like that?
Yeah, the same. I haven't specifically looked at those, but a lot of the same principles would apply.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you'd have different striking mechanisms. Like I've looked at plucked strings, and there's also the whole area of research on bowed strings. Yeah, so a lot of the same principles would apply. It would just take some different methods of collecting data, really.
That's cool, man. I know when I was first digging into um, deciding I was going to go to college for music and then figuring out, oh, I need to like have a primary instrument and started learning classical guitar, uh, kind of learning that history of like, I didn't know what strings were even really made of and things like that. So it's just interesting in general. But through kind of this PhD process, what and the research process, what have been some favorite memories and things that you've gathered through all of this?
Huh. Favorite memories. There's been some weird ones that have kind of
I can
intersected
only imagine. Yeah. Yeah.
that have kind of intersected with touring and working as a musician. One that comes to mind was we had just played a show in Paris, and it was like 2 a.m, and I was back at my hotel, uh, replying to emails from students in the structural design class I was the TA for that were panicking about their homework due the next day. And so I was sitting in my Paris hotel at 2 a.m answering structural design questions after playing a show.
That's pretty darn cool.
Another one was probably we had just done this little tour around the Southeast with Sturgill Simpson, and we ended playing this festival in Louisville, actually, Forecastle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we played Forecastle. I think that might have been 2017 or 18.
Awesome.
And so we finished our set and drove back to Nashville that night, got in at like 4 a.m. And then I went straight to the airport, caught a flight to Montreal, and gave a presentation on my research at 4 p.m that day.
Just this weird duality of lives. So,
Yeah. So
what has that been like managing? Because we haven't even gotten into that yet. What are the bands and projects you're a part of now?
So right now, I mean, the all the touring that I've done has been with Adia Victoria. And so we're working on writing some new music right now, actually. Um, and then that's kind of been my main thing over the past several
Mhm.
years, because with grad school, I haven't really had time to commit to anything else. I've barely had time to be in one band. Um, and so that's actually something I'm looking to branch out a little bit more now that I have more time on my hands to kind of get involved in some more projects. I'm working on a solo album right now that I've kind of been recording on and off over the years, but haven't really had the time to dedicate to finish.
Well, you say that casually, like you weren't just touring with Sturgill Simpson or anything. So it's not like this was a garage band. So you also mentioned that you all were featured on Obama's Songs of the Year, right? So tell me a little bit about that weird experience for you.
Oh, I mean, Adia and I were just actually out for a walk in the park in South Carolina, and she just got an email that said we were on that list. So it was kind of out of the blue, but it was cool to hear.
So, and what's your role in that band with her?
I play guitar, and we write together. Like she does a lot of writing on her own, but we write a lot together as well. And we kind of work on new songs together.
What's your favorite? What are a couple of your favorites to play with her?
Let's see. A song off our last album called "Dope Queen Blues." It's always a really fun. We got to tour with a 7-piece band a lot last year, and with a couple of horn players, and that song was just always really cool. I love the horns and the way our keyboardist Pete plays piano on it.
That's awesome, man. So, how is that duality? How did you manage to keep that up while you're doing high level research and I mean, professional musician stuff as well? How did you kind of keep the train on the tracks, if you will?
It was pretty stressful at times, but a combination of things. I took a few semesters like as a part-time student. So I did like take a little bit of time off of school in a sense, um, here and there. And also you get a lot of downtime as a touring musician. You spend a lot of time around hotels, in a van, on a plane. And so I was actually able to get a fair amount of work done on the road on my computer.
Yeah, I think with the diligence, I don't know. I did my master's thesis and I was kind of like, yeah, I think I'm done with and I published one paper and I was like, yeah, I could never do this again and be totally good. But I can see having that downtime uh, with the diligence, it could be put to pretty good use.
Yeah, exactly.
But with diligence is like bold and underlined, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of tour where you're just kind of stuck somewhere with not a whole lot to do. And I mean, it's great to get out and explore cities, and sometimes I'll have friends in cities to meet up and hang out with. But a lot of the time, you're in Fargo, North Dakota at the Holiday Inn for a day, and you might
Yeah.
might as well work on a paper.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, that's awesome. What do you think uh, are some of the next things you're interested in now that you're, Dr. Hickman over here? What do you want to look at next? Are you looking for a teaching position, or what do you think you'll do?
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to figure that out myself right now.
Yeah, not to ask you a week after it happened,
No,
but
no, yeah, I definitely, I am interested in teaching at some point. I've always enjoyed teaching. Whether that's next or whether I would take something in industry first is kind of up in the air right now.
that's cool. Do you think there are any spots for the niche that you've carved out in instrument manufacturing stuff?
I think so. Yeah. So that's, I'd be very interested in working with a guitar company potentially, or, a pedal company, really anything. There's doing some similar research.
Yeah, what are some of the problems that you've uncovered now, or not even necessarily problems, but just interest areas that you want to start flipping rocks over in different music instrument things?
Um, I mean, nothing too dramatic, but, uh, just that I've learned a lot about test methods, for example, for vibrations and things, and so there's all sorts of interesting things that you could measure with the materials used to build guitars or drums or really anything for that matter. Um,
You already
and I
talked about
haven't,
the Arduino and everything.
yeah, I haven't thought too much about this in terms of research fields. Um,
Or
so, I
do you
mean,
not want to do that at all right now? I also
well,
know you
okay.
just said,
I'm trying to. I've got some things, some talks with people in the works that I'm not sure if I want to like
no, you're fine. Don't spill
talk
the beans.
publicly.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
you're good. Well, awesome, man. What would you say for someone like you? Because you kind of recognize, hey, I really love music, but I also really love math and the sciences and physics and all these other things. What would you recommend to a high schooler or someone trying to figure out a career path that found themselves interested in a lot of the same things you're interested in?
I would probably tell them to stick with making music if it's what you enjoy doing. You can find there's a lot of, I guess there's a lot of niches within the music industry, and it's about finding something, a skill that you have that makes you unique, and you'll be able to find something.
That's cool, man. What do you think? Was there anything you think you would do differently if you kind of ran through the whole process again? Or
I would have probably actually studied something more along the lines of electrical engineering. I think I've gotten really into things like designing pedals and amps and things as a hobby, and I guess sometimes I wish I had a little bit more of a background in that, a little bit more of a formal education.
Yeah, it seems like many successful pedal and amp companies came from much less of an engineering background than you. So
That's true. It's not to say that you need it. I guess it just helps me sometimes to have a curriculum when I'm learning something that like that.
the structure of it, yeah, for sure. Well,
Yeah.
with that in mind, what's something you've been learning from different amps or pedals recently that's just been kind of blowing your mind?
Oh, like specific amps and pedals and things.
Yeah,
Gear?
sure.
Are
Yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
gearing
People like
out?
that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on with pedals right now. I got an Infinite Jets a few years ago that I think is really
Mm,
cool from Hologram Electronics.
that's cool.
I use that a lot in my studio to do like ambient noises and things. It's a really fun pedal. Um, Most recently, I got the Electro Harmonix Attack Decay,
Mm,
um, which for a really long time I've been looking for like an auto triggered envelope pedal for guitar, and there's just not a lot of great options out there, I don't think. And so I think it does like basically auto volume swells and things really well compared to what's been available before.
that's cool. And digging into the circuit a little bit with that, I would assume.
Not too much. I'm still learning a lot about that stuff.
That's cool. Well, I've appreciated the time in the chat. I would just like to kind of wrap up a little bit with um, considering your very unique perspective on music. You know, you're a touring musician. You've really looked super in depth at the mechanics and science behind some things. Why and how do you inspire others to make more music?
I think that music's the truly universal language, um, and that it can really enrich people's lives. And there's a lot going on in the world right now,
Mm,
but people really bond over music, and it's unfortunate, I think, to see the trend of cutting arts education
yeah.
in this country. Um, and so I guess just by spreading the work that I'm doing, I would hopefully encourage other people to get interested in it also. Um, I think a lot of people are like intimidated by math in a way.
Yeah.
Or, a lot of people never liked math. And I think that it's actually through music you can understand a lot of things about math. Like I know people that never studied math really formally, but through music they're able to pick up on patterns, and like they're talking about frequencies and milliseconds and things, and it's like
Yeah.
they can actually people can actually kind of come to understand certain aspects of math through music.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm taking audio engineering as faculty at my university. I get to take courses.
Mhm.
So I'm taking audio engineering with a bunch of 19-year-olds this semester. And it's just like, I feel like so many things in life in general are just clicking for me right now with all the understanding of that information and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Well, if you were going to tell somebody, like you said, that was getting interested in doing these lines of research or wanted to partner with you or something, what would you tell them that could help them, maybe avoid some hurdles and things like that?
Um, don't start grad school without a research project specifically in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Take some time to figure it out. I went straight into grad school, and I think maybe I would have taken some time off going back.
That's good, man. Well, I appreciate you. Where do you want people to find, uh, you know, the music that you make, the research you're putting out, anything you're doing? Where do you want people to find you and your related projects online?
Let's see. I'm actually kind of working on designing a website right now. I don't have one, but in the meantime, I would say probably just follow me on Instagram. That's the only. social media I have.
Sweet. Well, Mason, thanks for chatting today. We went really high level on some things and really granular on other things. So I'm appreciative of what you're doing. I have mad respect for completing this PhD, and I'm looking forward to see what comes out of all the projects that you're involved in the future. So for Mason and Chris, we're signing off. Remember, give more grace, share more love, and make more music. All right. If you enjoyed that chat with Mason, I'd love if you'd go and give us a rating and review on your podcast player and tell one of your friends about the show. Otherwise, I'll catch you on the next one. Remember, if you want to learn ukulele, I'm offering online ukulele classes through my clinic, the University of Louisville Music Therapy Clinic. You can find us on Instagram at U of LMTC. And as always, you can follow the show at make.more.music on Instagram, or send me an email at makemoremusicpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, everybody, give more grace, share more love, make more music.